Today I want to talk about an exercise that I found really helpful and kind of unintuitive. Very simple. And when somebody suggested it to me, I gave a lot of resistance to it, and it ended up being really useful. It's called the Ideal Year Plan. And let me explain it to you, and let me just warn you one more time. This is going to sound really cliche when I first explain it to you, but if you're in a place where you're burned out and you're stuck and you don't know how to kind of reorient yourself and gain that center of mind again, to motivate yourself and to live a life of purpose and vision, just hear me out. And maybe this exercise could be helpful for you too, because it actually was for me. So, the whole premise of this is that when you're burned out, it becomes really difficult to picture the next year of your life clearly, and you just start living in a default mode. And you have in the back of your mind, maybe even subconsciously, because work and life has just pushed it so far down, you have these ideas and these goals and these plans and these like aspirations and desires, but they don't connect with your daily life in any other way other than just this deep yearning that feels like deeper and deeper every day because it's getting pushed down. And then you have all of these competing voices in your life that are making claim to your time, and it's hard to tell which ones really matter and what should you pay attention to. And even when you try to choose, that act of planning feels heavy and disconnected and unstable and unfair and exhausting. And you're too close to the edge to start fantasizing. The idea of, oh, I'm going to write my ideal year down. It sounds like a luxury that that people that are not busy without obligations have, but real people with real jobs and real responsibilities in life don't have time to sit down and write their ideal year. I get that for sure. I had intense pushback to this idea. Um, you don't need another vision. You've got enough vision. You know, it'd be great if my life was a little different in these ways, maybe really different in some ways, right? You need a grip on what's going on right now. But what I'm telling you is that counterintuitively, this exercise of the ideal year exercise, um, which I'm going to explain to you, where you write down what your next ideal year is going to look like. And I'm going to walk you through the process of how to do that effectively. It's essentially an exercise in self authorship, or future authorship, rather. This exercise, I'm going to explain why it actually helps you to get a grip on your life rather than serving as just an indulgence or a distraction from your current life. What this exercise does is it helps you write a single version of the next year that is livable and clear and worth showing up for. Not because it's dramatic or luxurious or fantastical, but because it actually does hold together. This is really not about writing your ideal next year is not about dreams. It's not about goals. It's about building one coherent outcome that would make the next 12 months feel resolved and possible and grounded, even if nothing else changes after that. And I know this is the last qualification I'll make before we hop into it, but I know, you hear this kind of advice all the time, and the problem is, and I've done a video series on advice and influencer advice and bad advice. The problem with all this advice is that it all sounds the same. If you write down your goals, you're more likely to accomplish them. Write down your list and write down, dude. If I wrote down everything people told me to write down, I'd have like thousands of pages of lists, and they'd all be equally useless to me. So how is this exercise not one more of those pieces of paper, right? So anyway, like if you have reservations, just know that I had these same reservations. I'm not even promising this will be helpful to you. What I'm saying is that this exercise, in spite of my cynicism, was unexpectedly helpful to me. So, what are we actually doing, and what frame are we bringing to this exercise? So, what we're going to do is we're going to write what we'll call the minimum viable best conceivable year. Okay? Hold that. This is the best conceivable year that you could have this year, but it's the minimum viable version of that. All right? That's what we're going to write. So, it should feel this minimum viable best conceivable year should feel slightly out of reach to you, but still usable and still achievable. It should feel relieving. It should quiet the noise, but you should, because what you're doing is you're achieving a conscious connection to that signal inside of you that has been repressed. It's the first thing we're going to do. Um, but before we do that, I just want to note a couple ways that we can actually do this poorly that we're going to avoid. So here are common ways that doing this exercise can go wrong, or doing any writing exercise really. And doing it this way can actually undermine your ability to get real value out of this. Number one is that you're too surface level. So you describe like routines and tasks and habits, but you don't clarify what they're supposed to change exactly. There's no reference point for why any of it matters, right? So you're too surface level, or you're too abstract, right? You describe feelings or traits. You're like, and in my ideal year, I'm focused, I'm at peace, I'm disciplined. But you never explain what circumstances would actually make that possible or satisfy those conditions. There's no environment, no schedule, no friction, just these abstract labels, right? So, common ways this can go wrong: too surface level, too abstract. Number three, too unrealistic. So you try to fit in everything you've ever wanted, right? You describe a life that doesn't fit inside of a 7-day week. It becomes uninhabitable, even on paper. And then number four, it's too reduced. So you lower your expectations so far that the version of life you write is sterile. It might be clean and manageable, but it's not connected to anything meaningful. You're not establishing that conscious connection to that signal inside of you that yearns for more. And so to get actual value, you'll need to go one layer deeper. So what I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself this: in a version of life that is not sabotaged by fatigue or chaos or distraction, what would I want to feel most days? And what would need to exist around me to make that feeling possible repeatedly? So I'm not going to repeat myself too much, but I am going to read this just one more time, okay? So ask yourself this: in a version of life that is not sabotaged by fatigue, chaos, or distraction, what would I want to feel most days? Isolate on that feeling. And what would need to exist around me to make that feeling possible repeatedly? That feeling might be grounded. It might be clear. You might want to feel effective. You might want to feel calm. You might want to feel proud or secure. Pick one. Then write the year that makes it possible. You're not writing about what you want to do. You're describing what conditions would give rise to that experience of life. If something doesn't contribute to that, then you cut it. If two things pull in different directions, you pick. If it sounds good but adds noise, you drop it. This exercise is about being ruthlessly decisive about what gets prioritized and what gets deprioritized. So what's a priority and what's called an anterior, I think it's called an anteriority or an anti-priority, one of those things. So you want 1 year that's slightly ambitious, entirely livable, fully yours. Now we want to write. And the way that we're going to achieve this in writing is we're going to select, or we're going to essentially ask ourselves questions about each domain of our life, each major domain of our life. This is going to be, and you can add domains to this if you'd like, but this is time, money, work, health, relationships, environment, and energy. So here are some writing exercises, and you can write these down. I'll have the link in the show notes to these questions. But here's what you want to journal out if you can. And trust me, I do not like journaling because my mind just goes in 1,000 billion, million, trillion different directions. But just ask yourself, okay, if ask yourself this: if this exercise could really deliver for me the kind of clarity it says it would I be willing to sit down, even though I've got all my wiggles and stuff, and do this anyway, right? So with time, what questions do you ask yourself to achieve your ideal year in the domain of time? What's over the next year? I'm not saying in a year, over the next year, what's no longer stealing your time? What is no longer stealing your time? How many hours are actually yours each day? What time do you wake up? What gets cut? Okay, that's time. Let's go to money. With money, what financial problem is no longer there? What number is in your account every month? What can you pay for without stress? Let's go to work. What type of work are you doing consistently? What projects are gone from your life? What do you actually ship each week, if that's a relevant question? Or what are you doing each week? What are you making? Then in health, with health, what's fixed? What's tolerable? What does your body feel like? If it's relevant, what does your body look like? What routines happen without effort? Now, in relationships, who do you see regularly? And if you can't think of somebody, make somebody up and then go find somebody like that and build that relationship. If you don't have anybody to see regularly, maybe that's part of it. I have somebody to see regularly and I see them. Who's gone from your life? What conversations no longer happen? What conversations start to happen in your life? What conversations are you able to have regularly over the next year that you've always wished you could have? What conversations are disappeared from your life that you always wish could be gone? Next, go to environment. Where do you live? What does your space look like? What does your space feel like? What is the natural environment around you? Are you in the mountains? Are you in the suburbs? Are you on the beach? Are you on a farm? Right? Where are you in a city? Where are you? And what does your space look like and feel like in that context? And what are the benefits of that? Um, what objects in your environment are always within reach? And why? And how does that feel? What do you do with them? And then finally, energy. What emotion is not there anymore? What's your internal state most days? How do you wake up feeling in your ideal year? What thought patterns have stopped looping? Okay, so these are the questions we ask across the domains of our life of time, money, work, health, relationships, environment, and energy. So, how do we turn so we have our answers to these questions in these domains. How do we turn it into a game plan? Once the year is written out, you have a direction, but your direction still needs movement. So what we need to do is we need to just translate your answers to these ideal year questions into action. So go back through each domain and ask one question. What are 1 to 2 behaviors that, if done consistently, would move me closer to what I wrote? Not tasks, not goals, just repeatable, observable action. These are habits, not in the motivational sense, but in the architectural sense. You're installing small levers that tilt your week toward the year you wrote. So, for example, for time, I set a work cutoff alarm every day at 6 p.m. or 4 p.m. With money, I save X dollars per month and I review spending every Friday morning. With work, I ship one thing daily at work and I brag about it to everybody. Do that every day. That's, let's say, a habit that you do. With health, maybe it's working out every day. With relationships, it's scheduling one in-person hangout each week, no matter how awkward or surface level. With environment, maybe it's that you make your bed every morning, or and also you clean the surfaces before you sleep every night. With energy, maybe it's that you log your mood and your sleep in one sentence each night, and the Apple Journal app is really good for this. These are mundane examples, but what I want you to do are set ambitious goals. right? I want you to set ambitious goals that feel uncomfortable, but give you a conscious connection to that feeling of internal peace. So that signal that yearns inside you for more exhales in relief and says, finally, I'm heard. Yes, do this, do this. That's the goal of writing this ideal year exercise. You don't need to change any, you need to change some things, but you don't need to change everything, is what I meant to say. You need 1 to 2 new inputs per domain in your life that shift the system into this form you've already described. This is not the time to dream. You already did that. This is the time to build one level down from that dream, just enough to start, just enough to begin. So, to wrap this up, the point of this exercise, the point of the ideal year exercise, is to activate your imagination so that when difficult or dismal moods come upon you, or you are dejected and despairing and exhausted and burned out, you have an image in your mind's eye. I did the ideal year exercise, and I have 1 to 2 habits per domain that help me to effectuate the ideas that I wrote down that satisfy the internal yearning inside of me. So I'm on the path, right? When those moods come upon you, you have an image in your mind's eye that compels you to move forward rather than to recline into your despair, into the despair of your burnout. The purpose of this exercise is to create this image. And when you finish writing, you reread it slowly. And if it feels obvious and slightly uncomfortable, then you did it right. You don't want, you don't need to want this ideal year forever. You just need one version that you can live completely without contradiction, that gives expression to that deepest signal inside of you that is despairing about your current life now, and that is expressing itself through your emotions as burnout. And once this ideal year exercise has been completed and that this document has been written, you can stop improvising your life every day and showing up not feeling like it's wave over wave over wave crashing over you. And instead, you can say, listen, all that other stuff can wait. I know what I'm doing. I'm listening to this internal yearning signal inside of me. And this ideal year vision is what I'm doing with my life, and everything will be subservient to that. And I'm telling you, the energy you get from that, the clarity, the focus, the willpower, the discipline, the consistency you can generate from having a conscious connection to that clear signal inside of you instead of repressing it is huge. So if you feel like I just don't have the willpower, I don't have the energy, I don't have the focus, I wake up every day desperate and tired and burned out and despairing. I understand that it's tempting to just push harder and to feel like the answer is to just add more willpower to that. And I don't know, man, sometimes that might be the answer. I've found myself in seasons of life where sometimes I just pushed harder and that ended up being the right answer. But that solution, number one, isn't the right answer every time, and number two, even when working harder is the answer, still doesn't give you the same thing as taking a step back does and gaining perspective. That's what this ideal exercise does. It's not just even taking a step back, it's taking a step inside yourself, reaching a hand out to that inner signal inside of you, saying, listen, you're powerful down there, and I've been pushing you down. I've deprioritized you so much, I've fully dissociated from this part of myself. And I'm not going to do that anymore because I can't survive without this power. I can't survive without this resource that's there, that's latent inside of me. One of the reasons I might be burned out is because I've got this power inside of me that I'm neglecting. And all of the universe, I know I'm not like cosmically or astrologically attuned or whatever, but all the universe is waiting for me to do is just use that resource, use that inner resource, is to take the step of courage to say, you know what, I'm going to take an act of faith in myself and assume that that internal resource actually has what I need and that I've been neglecting it um, by trying to push so hard that I've deprioritized that part of myself that can give me vision. Sometimes you don't need vision. Sometimes you just need cold, hard work ethic. But if you're burned out, you probably need vision, and that vision exists inside of you. And the ideal year exercise is a way to connect with that vision and pull it out and leverage it as a resource of power and energy and focus. So I encourage you to do this. I had, as I said, enormous pushback to this concept when it was suggested to me, but something about it felt powerful, so I did it. And I'm still kind of reeling from the emotional experience of that exercise. So let me know in the comments if you did it and how it worked for you.